Well, today we celebrate our Western heritage, and there's no better place to start than with Oklahoma's favorite son, Will Rogers. Our Courtney Dioff visited the museum that honors his life and legacy and joins me now here in studio.
Well, born in 1879 on a sprawling ranch near what would later become Oologah, Oklahoma, Will Rogers was one part cowboy, one part Indian, and all entertainer.
He could nail people. He could take somebody that thought they were a little too important and he'd just bring them down the level.
1/3 humor, 1/3 humanitarian, and 1/3 heart. Will Rogers is often referred to as Oklahoma's favorite son, and the museum that has a horse-eye view over the city of Claremore honors him daily.
He became a lifetime
Andy
member
Hogan takes us on a tour of the museum
But anyhow, this room here is set up. This room is just
and the life of the legendary Will Rogers.
Will Rogers, of course, being born like anybody could be born right out here. He was not a poor man. Will was never a poor man, but he was common. He wanted to be common. He went out of his way to appear common. He wasn't put on. What you saw was what you got. He had millions of dollars. He helped people. He gave away millions of dollars. He was quite a philanthropist, and he was the kind that didn't want a splash made of it.
But he did make a splash in everything else he did.
He taught people to laugh at themselves. Like I say, he performed in front of several presidents. He appeared at the White House, spent the night in the White House with Calvin Coolidge when he was president, and also with Franklin Roosevelt. But he could tease those people, and they realized that, you know, that he was merely teasing them. He said, "I've teased the important people of the world. I've teased the big men, and the big men will take teasing." He said, "Sometimes a little man that thinks he's kind of big don't take teasing too well."
The museum honors Will Rogers and his family on the outside, and on the inside, the wonders of the most popular entertainer of his time ropes in tourists from all around the world.
The museum now is located on 20 acres that Will bought back in 1911. He bought all the land he could. He bought land in Oklahoma. He bought land in California. He said, you know, one time, buy all the land you can. That's a good thing to spend your money on because they ain't making any more of it.
A jack of all trades, Will Rogers was a movie star.
When he started making movies, he ended up making 50 silent movies.
A pilot, a cowboy, and one of the most prolific writers ever, publishing roughly 4,000 newspaper columns and 6 books. But he was first and foremost a showman.
He became important because of the kind of person he was and the way he looked at things. You know, he said everything can be lightened if you just really look at it. You know, the light side of it, everything can be scary if you look at the scary side of it. But he was just a common man that became well known throughout. People loved him. People wanted to be like him. People quoted him. They emulated him, and he was the real deal. He didn't let them down.
The entire world mourned when Rogers went down in a plane with fellow Oklahoman Wiley Post in Point Barrow, Alaska, a tragic death at the height of his popularity.
They climbed into the cabin of their plane, the Winnie Mae, waved a last goodbye to the many friends who had gathered to bid them Godspeed, and disappeared into northern skies. A few days later, Hollywood was stunned by news of their death.
Yet his legacy lives on. Starring in 21 major motion pictures and eventually becoming Hollywood's highest paid actor, Will Rogers was the star of silent films and the face of major motion pictures with sound. He became one of America's most beloved people.
And it certainly sounds. He was pretty much adored by almost everyone.
He really was, Rob. When I toured the museum, they let me in on kind of a cool story. There's a statue of Will Rogers in Statuary Hall in Washington, D.C. that faces directly into the halls of Congress. And they say when every president walks by for his inaugural address, they'll rub the shoes of Will Rogers, so maybe a little bit of his spirit will rub off on them. Great story. Thank you so much, Courtney. Now, when we come back, we'll show you how some folks have turned the tragedy of the airplane crash that killed Will Rogers and Wiley Post into an annual event honoring their pioneering aviation legacy.